Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're taking a look at Loretta Lynn and she's going to be playing through her 1966 hit, You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man. So let's get Loretta up on screen and see how she gets on.
Singing You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man, here's Miss Loretta Lynn.
You say you're gonna take him, oh, but I don't think you can, 'cause you ain't woman enough to take my man. Women like you, they're a dime a dozen, you can find anywhere. For you to get to him, I'd have to move over, and I'm gonna stand right here. It'll be over my dead body, so get out while you can, 'cause you ain't woman enough to take my man. Sometimes a man's caught looking at things that he don't need. He took a second to look at you, but he's in love with me. Well, I don't know where that leaves you, oh, but I know where I stand. And you ain't woman enough to take my man. Women like you, they're a dime a dozen, you can find anywhere. For you to get to him, I'd have to move over, and I'm gonna stand right here. It'll be over my dead body, so get out while you can, 'cause you ain't woman enough to take my man. Yeah, you ain't woman enough to take my man.
And there we have it. Straight away, we've got that country contradiction with the lyrical content and the upbeat nature of the music and the major chords. And just talking about the major chords, we've got Loretta here just playing the acoustic guitar, but if you do play guitar yourself, and you might look at her fretboard and think, what is she playing when she moves over to the D chord? Because it looks like she's supplying the same shape that you'd have with your major chord that we start with, A, and then going over to the D shape. Of course, if you move everything down, you're going to get a D minor, whereas she's just strumming the root note of the chord, that first string, and then taking her hand very lightly off those strings to get that percussive strike that's going to give you the drive of the song. I know that we have also got another acoustic guitar that's directly behind her that is supplying the same rhythm. The other thing about this performance is that if you were to watch it with the sound off, the way that Loretta is performing it and smiling, you would assume that it is something happy, and it's not necessarily that with the lyrical content. And Loretta, especially being one of those artists that would write about really serious topics, to the point where her music would be rejected by radio stations because of the subject of particular songs. And we'll be covering that a little bit later on in this particular video, but having that pedal steel guitar in there as well gives it that classic country sound. And as we progress through the song, it's only just over 2 minutes in length here, but we still get that introduction of the fiddle in that second verse. So instrumentally, things are moving along, and you'll find that on all of the hits with all of the great bands and artists, they very rarely go all in from start to finish. It's these instruments that just come in to play their part and then drop out that make the journey so interesting. Obviously, with country music, it's all about dynamics. We always have that pedal steel guitar that can take the focus outside of the lead vocal, but they will play off each other, and then the other instruments, like a fiddle, will just come in particular sections to keep it interesting. Another thing to notice about Loretta's guitar playing is that full bar chord shape that she's got in position, and it takes a lot of practice to get that clean and just to play it. First of all, there are a lot of guitar players who just play open chords down at the bottom of the guitar, and when they want to change the key, they'll use the capo rather than getting involved with bar chords. And it's something that if you do play seriously, of course, you're going to get your bar chords down and get them all really nice and clean. But if you're just playing to accompany yourself and you're not going to be going really deep into the technical aspects of playing, then like I said, some people just rely on a capo. But she only started playing guitar at age 21, so she certainly was a late starter, but made sure that she could definitely get down the chords and accompany herself while she sang. And that guitar was bought for her by her husband, who was Loretta Lynn. The other thing to mention about Loretta is that voice, because Loretta is so accurate pitch-wise. Even with all the classic country trills that are thrown in there, the way that she glides from note to note and slides into notes, ascending and descending, it's such an accurate sound pitch-wise that if it wasn't, it would be so evident, because she doesn't apply a lot of vibrato, and there's not a great deal of vibrato in this performance throughout the whole performance until the end, when she just hold on that last note. You get to hear that vibrato just creep into that vocal, but because she's not using that particular technique, it means every single note that she's singing has to be spot on, because it's not wavering from the pitch that she should be singing. With country music in general, you'll have so many straight notes, so that pitch has got to be spot on. And Loretta's example here, it's almost like auto-tune, but without auto-tune, because it's so good. You still keep all of those human elements in there, but it is so accurate. It's great to listen to, and it's a marvel to have a listen to somebody's vocal that is so accurate, so under control, and just popping to those pitches, so relaxed in nature vocally as well. It seems so easy for Loretta to hit these pitches absolutely dead on. Loretta Lynn is one of those legendary country artists who has had such a prolonged career, over 60 years in the industry, and it all started when she was 15. She got married to Loretta Lynn, who I mentioned earlier, and certainly having that contact with him, she got into music and was fully supported by him as well in order to start her career. She would go out and she would gig. She started her own band. In 1960 is when she made her first record, and she was part of that whole 1960s Nashville country music scene. And putting things in perspective, she was singing about things like birth control and the double standards between men and women. In 1966, she had a song called Dear Uncle Sam, and that was about the war in Vietnam, and more specifically regarding a woman who'd lost her husband and had been widowed because he'd been killed. And these weren't the things that you were singing about, or other people were singing about in the 1960s, especially in country music. It's having those major chords and having such serious lyrical content. And she paid the price for this, because a lot of radio stations back in the 60s wouldn't play her songs because of the subject matter. Rewinding a few years to just explain how she got into the country music scene and started to record, because she entered a TV talent contest, and it was hosted by Buck Owens, who you can find on the channel here somewhere if you want to check him out. But she won a wristwatch. She was noticed by Norm Burley, who owned a record company called Zero Records, and he saw Loretta and signed her up, and this was in 1960. So after she signed the deal, she then went out and promoted her music as much as possible and went on a countrywide tour to get her songs on the radio. And she started to make a bit of a name for herself. She was getting radio airplay with the songs that they would agree to play. And this led her to start recording demos for the Wilburn Brothers publishing company. And through that, eventually, it led her to sign a deal with Decca Records. In 1960, she was printed as being the 4th most promising female country artist by Billboard magazine. And unfortunately, around this time as well, like I mentioned, she signed with the Wilburn Brothers publishing company. And like with so many artists, she spent the next 30 years trying to get back the rights to her own songs and all of her own music, and she was unsuccessful after 30 years. It's something that always pops up on the channel, that the music industry have been doing this since day one. They get you to sign a publishing contract, and the record deal, the publishing company, will have the rights to your music. Fortunately, nowadays, everyone can keep their rights. There's no need to sign them off to anybody else. You can do it all yourself on the internet. But it's a real shame. This is the reason that she stopped writing music full stop in the 1970s, because of the problems with copyright and not even owning your own songs. When you sign to a record label, especially a major label, they will make you sign over the rights to your music. So Loretta just found it was easier for her when she was signed to a major label to not write any songs because it wasn't worth the hassle. So that publishing company did go on to make a hell of a lot of money from Loretta, because she became the #1 female country music artist at the time. We're talking early 60s. She was so prolific with her albums, with her writing. She was also the first female country artist to have a self-penned #1. So she had the ability to write great songs that would connect with an audience en masse, and just dominated those country music charts for the best part of 17 years. During that period, she also teamed up with Conway Twitty, and they had 5 consecutive #1s between the years of 1971 and 1975, and in 1976 is when she released her autobiography, and that was called Coal Miner's Daughter, which went to #1 in the bestsellers list. That was in the New York Times, and it was the first country music artist to ever have achieved that as well. In 1977, she released the album I Remember Patsy, and that was in memory of her good friend Patsy Cline, and there was a track from that particular album called She's Got You, and that got to #1 for Loretta in 1977, but it had previously been a #1 for Patsy back in 1962. In 1980 is when the movie was released, Coal Miner's Daughter, and that was a massive hit. She continued to release albums throughout the 80s. Her final major label album release was in 1988, and that was the album Who Was That Stranger? In the year 2000, she released her album called Still Country, and there's a track on there called Country in My Jeans, and that charted, which made Loretta the first country artist to have charting singles in 5 separate continuous decades. So that was a record in itself. In 2002, she released her second autobiography, and again, that made it into the top 10 of the New York Times bestseller list. And that was the same year that she recorded her album, which was called Van Lear Rose, and that won a Grammy. It was also produced by Jack White from the White Stripes. He also played guitar on that album as well. In 2012, she released her third autobiography, and in 2016, she released the album Full Circle, and that featured Willie Nelson and Elvis Costello, and you can check those two guys out independently if you want to. They're on the channel here somewhere. And that album was her 40th top 10 album. So still going strong with her 2018 release, which was called Wouldn't It Be Great? And that got to number 8 in the country music charts. And that was due to be released a little bit earlier, but unfortunately Loretta had a stroke in 2017. That was in May, I believe. So it was delayed a little bit, and then she also fractured her hip. So she's taken a little bit of time just to make sure that she's fit and well, and that release did come at the end of 2018. Obviously, I'm not going to have time to cover everything in this video, but Loretta Lynn, one of the legends of the country music genre, she's the most awarded country musician. She's had 24 #1 singles, 11 #1 albums, and has had such a long and successful career. Is also in the Country Music Hall of Fame and also the Songwriters Hall of Fame. She's achieved so much throughout that time, and as I said, has an album release as recent as 2018. So we can tell from this particular video that she's a true artist, releasing songs that they actually refused to play back in the 1960s because of the subject matter, but she stuck to her guns, and that's what a true artist always does. But thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!